When you're ready.
Should we experiment on the human genome? By Claudia, Izzy, Audrey, and Lauren. First, we will provide some context and history in order to answer the pressing question, should we experiment on the human genome? What is genome editing? Genome editing is the ability to customize the genetic makeup of an organism. This editing is done by using enzymes to cut the double DNA strand. Next, the scientists add, delete, or replicate specific DNA sequences in the organism. Genetic engineering can be done either in vitro or ex vitro. These are some of the major milestones in human genome editing. In 1990, the Human Genome Project came up with the ambitious goal to map every single gene in the human body. This goal was completed in 2003. The CRISPR protein was discovered in 1997 by Spanish graduate student Francisco Mujica. After researching the protein further, he found that the purpose of CRISPR was adaptive immunity in bacteria. In late 2018, the world was shocked with the news that the first genetically modified babies had been born. Ha Jiankui was the scientist that performed this very controversial experiment in hopes of granting the babies HIV immunity. This brings us back to our initial question of should we experiment on the human genome? Although human genome has the potential to save lives, we have come to the consensus that we should not experiment on the human genome because of the high probability of its misuse. We will explore this through the ethical, social, and economic lenses.
The main ethical concern in human genome editing is the unknown safety risks, particularly due to the potential for off-risk target effects and Mosheism. Safety remains the primary focus and is highlighted in the National Genome Research Institute, emphasizing the necessity for extensive research before implementing genome editing. While genome editing offers the promise of enhancing embryos and preventing genetic diseases, the risk of off-target effects presents a darker side, potentially leading to irreversible effects and consequences of a significantly altered life for an edited child. While initially aimed at preventing deadly diseases, there is a growing concern that CRISPR might be used for cosmetic alterations in children. Changing a child so they have blue eyes as opposed to brown is very different from changing the genetic makeup of a child so they don't suffer from sickle cell anemia their entire life. The Yale Journal of Biology and Medicine points out how techniques intended for medical purposes are now being used for cosmetic purposes, highlighting the risk of misusing life-saving technologies. The misuse raises ethical concerns regarding equitable access and prioritization of wants over genuine medical needs. The potential negative consequences of genetic editing might outweigh its perceived benefits, emphasizing the ethical imperative to proceed cautiously. Which leads me to my third point, justice and equity, which goes hand in hand with CRISPR. If used, there's a risk of separating society solely based on if a person has altered genetics or not. Many sources believe it is what society will succumb to, those who can afford CRISPR and those who can't. Justice, equity, and equality would all be at risk if one person was able to edit the genetics for personal gain. The divide between those who can afford and those who can't afford will create a deeper divide in our culture as it is today.
The social lens of human genome editing. In the U.S., disparities exist in affordability and access, even with the most basic healthcare, which is limited not only financially but also geographically for the disadvantaged. Potential benefits of these scientific advances would therefore not be accessed or experienced equally among all within society. According to the World Health Organization, only 10% of $70 billion spent worldwide on health research supported the needs of the world's population. Large medical companies focus research on profitable markets. For example, in the last 2 decades, only 1% of new drugs targeted tropical diseases, like those found in the most poor and marginalized areas in the world. If genetic research and access do not represent the diversity of the world, only future generations of affluent populations will reap the benefits. Negative perceptions of disabled people. Experimenting on the genome may reinforce these negative views of people with disabilities. As discussed at the National Convention on Disability Rights and Genetic Technologies, many people are concerned that the increasing use of genetic technologies reflects and reinforces societal assumptions that disability is always harmful and should be prevented. Disabilities are perceived as an irregularity that must be fixed and not accepted, often referred to as ableism, a view that disability is an abnormality instead of a feature of human diversity. The concern here is that people with disabilities are less valued, and if these technologies become more common, there will be less social acceptance and investment in research programs and services that support these individuals. Pressure will be put on prospective parents who may have to choose to not have children at all due to financial burdens or anguish it poses on the family. If securing conventional outcomes becomes a priority, refusing it may be considered irresponsible because they have not controlled against susceptibility to genetic disease in their children. Further, it is argued that CRISPR technology may justify the creation of designer babies, making genetically perfect offspring a regularity. It would then be conceivable using this to create a super race of better, stronger, and smarter individuals, having devastating consequences on the stability of society.
In order to determine whether or not human genome editing is good for society as a whole, it's necessary that we look at the economic aspect of it. First, the pursuit of profit by many pharmaceutical companies may be deemed as necessary for progress, but ultimately it does pose concern when it comes to human genome editing. In the United States, virtually all of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved medicines were developed by for-profit corporations, meaning that they were there to make money, not to actually help people. The profit-driven nature of these companies possesses severe concern because it leads for them to put financial gain over the well-being of the people that they are there to serve. In the context of human genome editing, this will lead to the exploitation of vulnerable individuals and it increase the amount of unethical practices in the name of profit. Second, the profit-driven nature of pharmaceutical companies hurts the reliability of research. A study found that if a pharmaceutical company funds a trial, the chance of a result and conclusion in that company's favor is actually increased. Inadequate data is catastrophic, specifically when it comes to human genome editing, and it has life-altering consequences. Sadly, when it comes to human genome editing, because of the for-profit nature of pharmaceutical companies, this increases. Second, many hospitals in most regions around the United States act as monopolies. Overall, there has been an increase of mergers and a decrease in diversity of different hospitals. This leads for them to increase the amount of prices these hospitals pose. In quote, hospitals in highly concentrated markets charge higher prices for medical services and negotiate higher prices from health insurance providers. This disproportionately affects lower income individuals, and in the future it is probable that human genome editing will result in more economic and healthcare disparities. If we continue on the path that we are going and do not solve the systemic problems that we are facing in the status quo today, the positive effects of human genome editing are going to be outweighed by the negative effects that they pose.
Our solution would be government policies that ensure human genome editing isn't misused for present or future generations.
Thank you.
Just grabbing my phone.
Okay, great. Izzy, give one specific way your thinking changed as a result of learning about Audrey's findings.
Audrey researched through the economic lens and focused on the monopolization of healthcare and how pharmaceutical industries are mostly profit-based. And that tied to my research that affordability poses the risk of a greater wealth gap in society.
Okay, thank you. Audrey, reflecting on your colleagues' work, which one had the greatest impact on your overall understanding of the problem that you identified?
I would probably say that Izzy's was probably one of the most impactful because I feel like hers really brought a lot of different perspectives in, and it was kind of more overall compared to mine, which was more just talking about the specific issues that will occur economically, while she was just talking about socially, which is more in general.
Okay, thank you. Lauren, if you had another team member, what other perspective could they have researched that would have made a useful contribution to your project?
If I had another team member, I think it would be helpful if they researched the historical and political lens. If the team member researched the history of human genome editing and its close ties to eugenics, I think it would have strengthened our argument. With history and politics always in play, someone researching history and politics would greatly improve our arguments.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. And finally, Claudia, What is a way in which your team's resolution makes you think differently or the same about your own individual research?
All three of my other group members came to a different conclusion than I did. And when I was writing my essay, I thought that my answer was pretty clear cut and almost even foolproof. But after reading their essays and working on the group presentation together, I realized that that isn't necessarily so in my original conclusion of yes, but kind of changed because I saw that they all had no as theirs.
Okay, thank you. Another round of applause.